I'm 68 years old, and I've kept something secret for 30 years. The night a male Bigfoot came to my cabin during an October storm, begging me to save his dying mate, and how that creature later saved my life when I was drowning in a flooding river. My name is Arthur Vance. I spent 40 years as a logger in the Olympic Peninsula, cut down more Douglas firs than I can count, cleared thousands of acres of old-growth forest for timber companies, made good money doing work that destroyed the wilderness I was living in, retired at 65 with a bad back, worse knees, and guilt I'd never admitted to anyone, built a cabin on 40 acres I'd bought with my last paycheck, planned to live out my remaining years alone, away from people who'd remind me that I'd spent my life tearing down forests older than human civilization. But one October night in 1994, during a heavy autumn rainstorm, something came to my door at 2 a.m. and changed everything. A male Bigfoot, 8 feet tall. Emerald green eyes filled with desperate human-like grief. He didn't attack, didn't roar. He knelt in the mud and rain, soaking wet, looking at me with such anguish that I understood immediately someone he loved was dying and he was begging me, a human, a stranger, possibly even an enemy, to help. I followed him into the storm, hiked 8 miles through rain and darkness to a ravine called Dead Man's Drop. Found his mate trapped by an old industrial logging cable, the kind I'd used for 40 years to haul timber. The steel had wrapped around her leg, tightening with every struggle, and the wound was severely infected. She was dying from sepsis. I got help, called Elena Russo, a retired veterinarian. We freed the female, treated the infection, saved her life. And the male Bigfoot, this creature I'd been taught didn't exist, placed his massive hand on Elena's shoulder in a gesture of trust and gratitude that proved he understood exactly what we were doing and why. For weeks after, he left gifts on my porch: fresh salmon, polished river agates, tokens of gratitude from a being who couldn't speak but could communicate thanks in ways that transcended language. And then in the spring, when I fell into a flooding river and was drowning, that same male dove into the whitewater and pulled me out, saved my life the way I'd saved his mates. This is the story of how a Bigfoot taught me that intelligence and compassion aren't uniquely human, that the creatures living in the forests I'd spent 40 years destroying were more than animals, that some debts transcend species, and that the most profound connections can form between beings who share nothing but the recognition that life, any life, is worth saving. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from today? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let me tell you what happened in the rain-soaked forests of the Olympic Peninsula. Act 2, Emotional Setup. I retired from logging in 1992. Wasn't a choice, my body just gave out. 40 years of cutting timber, operating heavy machinery, working 12-hour days in all weather. My back was shot, knees barely worked, hands so arthritic I could barely grip a coffee cup some mornings. But the physical pain wasn't the worst part. The worst part was looking back at 40 years of work and realizing I'd spent my entire adult life destroying something irreplaceable: old-growth forests, trees that had been standing for 500, 600, 700 years, ecosystems that would take centuries to regrow, all of it gone because timber companies paid good wages, and I needed to feed my family. My wife, Linda, had died in 1989. Cancer. Our kids were grown and living in Seattle, barely speaking to me. They'd become environmentalists, ironically, blamed me for contributing to deforestation, to habitat destruction, to everything wrong with industrial logging. They weren't wrong, but they were my kids, and their judgment hurt worse than any physical injury. I bought 40 acres on the Olympic Peninsula with my final paycheck, remote property, accessible only by a rough logging road that became impassable in winter. Built a small cedar cabin, did the work myself despite my ruined back, because what else was I going to do? The isolation suited me. No neighbors to judge. No timber company bosses telling me which section of forest to clear next. No kids looking at me like I was personally responsible for climate change. Just me and the rain. The Olympic Peninsula gets 140 inches of rainfall a year. The cabin roof was a constant drumbeat of water. The forests were perpetually wet, shrouded in mist, dense with ferns and moss. I'd wake up, make coffee, sit on my porch watching fog roll through the Douglas firs I hadn't cut down. Would spend days without speaking to another human. Would go weeks without leaving the property. People in town, the small community of Forks 20 miles away, they knew me as that hermit logger. The guy who'd spent his career destroying forests and now lived alone in one, presumably drowning in guilt and regret. They weren't wrong about that either. By autumn of 1994, I'd been living alone on the property for 2 years. The isolation was wearing on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Started talking to myself. Started having conversations with Linda even though she'd been dead for 5 years. Stopped maintaining the cabin properly. Stopped caring about much of anything. The guilt of 40 years of logging had calcified into something heavier, acceptance that I'd wasted my life doing harm for money and there was no redemption available. My kids called occasionally. Duty calls, nothing more. They'd ask if I was okay, if I needed anything. I'd say I was fine. We'd hang up. The emptiness would return. I wasn't suicidal, just done. Waiting for my body to finish giving out so I could stop carrying the weight of a lifetime spent on the wrong side of environmental destruction. That October night, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain, wind bending the trees, the kind of weather that makes the forest feel alive and hostile. I was sitting by my wood stove drinking coffee, listening to the rain hammer my roof. And then came the pounding on my door. The pounding was rhythmic, deliberate. 3 heavy impacts, pause, 3 more impacts. Not random, not a branch blown against the door by wind. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door expecting maybe a bear or an elk that had gotten confused in the storm. What I found was a male Bigfoot, kneeling in the mud outside my door. Rain pouring off his dark brown fur. Eyes, emerald green, impossibly human, locked on mine with such desperate pleading that I physically recoiled. He didn't move toward me, didn't make threatening sounds. Just knelt there in the rain, making a soft, anguished vocalization that sounded like grief and desperation mixed together. Then he gestured. Actually gestured, pointed into the forest, then back at himself, then at me. Come, follow, please. I should have been terrified, should have slammed the door, grabbed a gun, called for help, but something in those eyes stopped me. Something that looked too much like the grief I'd seen in Linda's eyes when the doctors told her the cancer was terminal. This creature was suffering. Someone he loved was in danger, and he was asking, begging for help from a species that hunts his kind. All right, I said, not knowing if he could understand English but needing to respond somehow. Let me get my gear. I grabbed my pack, first aid kit, rain gear, headlamp, satellite phone in case I needed to call for help, followed the Bigfoot into the storm. He moved through the forest with purpose. Not running. He kept checking to make sure I was following, adjusting his pace to accommodate my slower human stride. His footprints in the mud were massive, 3 times the size of mine, easily 18 inches long with distinct toe impressions. We climbed, higher into the cascades. The rain was relentless. My headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating the creature's massive form ahead of me, weaving between trees with grace that seemed impossible for something so large. After maybe 2 hours of hiking, he led me toward a ravine, Dead Man's Drop, a place locals avoided. Steep sides, rocky bottom, dozens of logging cables and old equipment abandoned decades ago when the timber companies moved operations elsewhere. At the edge of the ravine, the male stopped, made a sound, half vocalization, half sob, pointed down into the darkness. I aimed my headlamp where he indicated, and I saw her, a female Bigfoot. Smaller than the male, maybe 7 feet tall, lying on her side near the bottom of the ravine. She was trapped. An industrial logging cable had wrapped around her left leg, and every movement caused the steel to tighten further. The wound was catastrophic. Even from the rim I could see the infection. The leg was swollen to twice its normal size. The skin around the cable was necrotic, black and rotting. She was shivering violently despite her thick fur. Septic shock. Hypothermia from lying in the rain. She was dying. The male climbed down carefully, positioned himself beside her, made soft, trilling sounds, trying to comfort her, trying to tell her help had arrived. She looked up at me, dark eyes filled with pain and fear, made a weak sound that could have been relief or could have been resignation. I stood at the rim of that ravine, looking at a dying Bigfoot trapped by logging equipment I'd used for 40 years, and understood with perfect clarity. This was my fault. Not directly, I hadn't set this cable, but I'd set hundreds like it, had left them behind when operations moved, had never thought about what would happen to wildlife that encountered our abandoned industrial waste. 40 years of logging, 40 years of treating the forest as a resource to exploit. And now a being who shouldn't exist according to science was dying because people like me had left lethal trash throughout the wilderness. I could walk away, pretend I'd never seen this, let nature take its course. The male would grieve, the female would die, and I could go back to my cabin and my isolation and my guilt. Or I could try to help, risk exposure, risk ridicule, risk everything to save a creature that most humans believed was folklore. I pulled out my satellite phone, called the only person I knew who might help and might keep this quiet. "Eleanor," I said when she answered, "it's Art Vance. I need you to come to Dead Man's Drop. Bring heavy bolt cutters, antibiotics, and everything you'd use to treat sepsis in large livestock. And Elena, don't ask questions until you get here, just trust me." While waiting for Elena, I climbed down into the ravine, approached the female slowly, hands visible, making soft sounds the way I'd seen the male do. She watched me with obvious fear, but the male made a reassuring sound, touched her shoulder gently, seemed to communicate, "This human is here to help." I examined the cable without touching her. It was wrapped tight, 3 loops around her leg, the tension increasing with every movement. The wound was worse up close. I could smell the infection, see bone through rotted tissue. "I'm going to try to help," I said, knowing she couldn't understand words, but hoping tone would communicate intent. "We need to cut this cable. It's going to hurt, but if we don't, you're going to die." She made a soft sound. Not agreement. She couldn't possibly understand what I was saying, but acknowledgement, awareness that I was there and trying to do something. The male sat beside her, placed one massive hand on her shoulder, kept making those soft, comforting trills. They were a pair. Mates, probably. And he'd left her side to find help because he loved her too much to watch her die without trying everything possible to save her. That kind of love transcends species. If you're watching this, and you've ever loved someone enough to ask for help when pride told you to handle it alone, stay with this story. My logging buddy said nobody would believe what happened that night, but if you're still here, you're proving them wrong. Hit subscribe. Help me show that stories about connection, about compassion across impossible boundaries, these matter. Now back to that ravine in 1994. Elena arrived 90 minutes later, drove her pickup as far as the logging road allowed, then hiked the rest with the equipment I'd requested. She was 62 years old, retired from veterinary practice for 5 years, still strong from decades of handling livestock. When she reached the ravine and saw what I'd called her to treat, she froze. Art. That's not possible. And yet here we are. She stared at the female Bigfoot for a long moment, then at the male, who was watching her with obvious suspicion, then back at me. "She's dying," I said. "Septic shock. That cable has been tightening for probably days. The infection is systemic. If we don't treat her now, she'll be dead by morning." Eleanor took a deep breath, set down her equipment. Okay. We treat her like any large mammal with similar injuries. Cable removal first, then wound cleaning, then antibiotics. But Art, that male, he's not going to let us hurt her. If she screams, if she struggles, he might attack." "I know." We climbed down with the bolt cutters and medical supplies. The male watched every movement, body tense, clearly ready to defend his mate if we posed a threat. Elena approached slowly. "Hey there," she said softly. "I'm here to help. I know you don't understand me, but I'm going to fix this. Okay?" The female made a weak sound. Her breathing was labored. Fever was spiking. I could feel the heat radiating from her even through the rain. "Art, hold this section of cable steady," Elena instructed. "I'm going to cut here. The tension release might cause pain when the cable comes off, so be ready." I gripped the cable. Elena positioned the bolt cutters. The male leaned forward, making a questioning sound. "It's okay," I told him, even though he couldn't understand. "We're helping. Trust us." Elena cut. The cable snapped with a sharp metallic crack. The female cried out, a sound of pain that was heartbreakingly human. The male surged forward. I thought we were about to die, but he didn't attack. He moved to his mate's other side, placed his hands on her shoulders, holding her steady while she trembled and cried. Looked at Elena and me with eyes that clearly communicated, "Keep going. Fix her." Elena began cutting the remaining loops. Each one released with the same sharp sound, each causing the female to vocalize in pain, each time the male providing comfort while letting us work. When the cable finally came free, the wound was fully exposed. It was worse than I'd thought. The metal had cut to the bone. Tissue was necrotic for inches around the injury. The infection was deep and spreading. "This is bad," Elena said, "really bad. I need to clean this thoroughly. It's going to hurt a lot." She pulled out antiseptic and surgical tools, started removing dead tissue, cleaning the wound, preparing it for antibiotics. The female was crying, actual tears running down her face, vocalizations of pain that made my chest ache, and the male stayed beside her, held her, made comforting sounds, never stopped providing presence and reassurance. 20 minutes of intensive cleaning. Eleanor worked with the efficiency of someone who'd treated hundreds of infected wounds. Finally, she was ready for the antibiotic injection. "This is a massive dose," she told me. "Enough for a horse. I'm going directly into the tissue near the infection site. It's going to hurt worse than anything we've done so far." Elena prepared the injection. The needle was enormous, meant for livestock. The female saw it, understood what was coming, started making distressed sounds. The male leaned forward, made a questioning sound to Elena, clearly asking what she was about to do. Elena showed him the syringe, made an injection gesture. "Medicine," she said, "to fight infection, to save her life." I don't know if he understood the words, but he understood the intent, and he did something that shocked both of us. He placed one massive, fur-covered hand on Elena's shoulder, gently, carefully, not restraining, steadying. He was trembling, clearly terrified, clearly ready to defend his mate if this went wrong, but he was giving permission, trusting us. "Okay," Elena whispered. "Okay, I won't let you down." She administered the injection. The female screamed, thrashed. The male held her steady, never removing his hand from Elena's shoulder, providing support to both the healer and the patient simultaneously. When it was done, Elena quickly bandaged the wound. "She needs follow-up care," she said. "More antibiotics in 12 hours, wound cleaning twice daily. This isn't over." The male was looking at her intently, seemed to understand that more treatment would be needed. "Can you bring her somewhere we can monitor her?" Elena asked. "Somewhere dry?" The male made a decisive sound, carefully lifted his mate, cradling her like she weighed nothing despite her being hundreds of pounds, started climbing out of the ravine with her in his arms. We followed them. The male carried his mate 3 miles through the forest to a location near my cabin, a rocky overhang that provided shelter from the rain. Laid her down gently on a bed of pine boughs he'd clearly prepared earlier. Then he looked at us, made a sound that was unmistakably, "Thank you," and he bowed, actually bowed, placed one fist over his chest, then lowered his head in a gesture of respect that transcended any cultural boundary. Eleanor and I stared at this 8-foot Bigfoot performing a ritual of gratitude, and I understood. These beings aren't just intelligent. They have culture. They have social structures and communication systems and emotional depth that rivals humans. "We'll come back in 12 hours, Elena told him, "with more medicine. Okay?" The male nodded. He understood. We hiked back to the logging road in silence. When we reached Elena's truck, she turned to me. "Art, what just happened? What did we just treat?" "Something that deserves better than what we've given them," I said. "Something that's been living in these forests while we've been destroying their habitat, leaving our trash everywhere, treating this place like it exists for our exploitation. You think there are more of them?" "I don't know. But that male knew to come to me for help. That means he's been watching humans, understanding us, maybe for his whole life, and we've never even acknowledged they exist." I went home that night thinking about 40 years of logging, about the forests I'd cleared, about the cables and equipment I'd abandoned, about the fact that a being I'd never believed existed had almost died because of industrial waste I'd helped create, and about the male who'd trusted me, a human, a logger, part of the species destroying his world, to save the life of someone he loved. That kind of trust changes you. We returned every 12 hours for the next week. Eleanor and I would hike to the rocky overhang with antibiotics and fresh bandages. The male would be there keeping watch over his mate. The female's condition improved steadily. The fever broke after 48 hours. The swelling started reducing. The wound began showing healthy granulation tissue instead of necrosis. By the 5th day, she was able to sit up. By the 7th day, she was eating. The male brought her plants and what looked like roots that Elena thought might have medicinal properties. "They understand herbal medicine," Elena said, examining the plants the male had gathered. "These are natural anti-inflammatories. Willow bark, devil's club root, things that would actually help her recovery." The male watched our treatments with intense focus, started anticipating what we needed, would have clean water ready from a nearby stream, would position his mate so we could access the wound easily, would hold her steady during painful procedures without being asked. He was learning, absorbing everything we did, building medical knowledge that he could apply if this ever happened again. On the 10th day, something remarkable happened. The female was well enough to stand, to walk short distances. Elena was removing the bandage for the final time. The wound had healed enough that it no longer needed covering. The female reached out and touched Elena's face, gently, carefully, with fingers that could have crushed Elena's skull, but instead traced her cheekbone with remarkable tenderness. Then she made a sound, soft, emotional, and pulled Elena into a hug. Elena froze, clearly terrified. This creature was twice her size, capable of incredible strength, but the embrace was gentle. The female was crying, actual tears, and the hug was gratitude expressed in the only way she could manage without language. After a long moment, Elena hugged back. The male watched this exchange, made a pleased sound. Then he approached me, held out one massive hand, palm up, a handshake gesture, universal sign of friendship and respect. I took his hand, felt the strength there, the calluses, the warmth. We shook, man and Bigfoot, both of us understanding that something had shifted. This wasn't just medical care anymore. This was connection. 3 days after the final treatment, I found something on my porch, a fresh king salmon, beautifully cleaned and gutted, still cold from the river, left sometime during the pre-dawn hours. The next morning there were river agates, polished by water until they gleamed, arranged in a careful pattern on my porch railing. The male was leaving gifts, tokens of gratitude, offerings that said, "You saved her life." I can never repay that debt, but I acknowledge it. I started reciprocating. Would leave food on the edge of my property, vegetables from my garden, canned goods, things I thought might be useful. Would hike the old logging roads with wire cutters and bolt cutters, removing abandoned cables and equipment, making the forest safer so what had happened to the female wouldn't happen to anyone else. Every time I removed a cable or a piece of dangerous equipment, I'd find fresh gifts on my porch the next morning. The male was watching, understanding what I was doing, appreciating the effort. We'd developed a relationship built on mutual respect and gratitude. No words needed, just consistent actions that communicated, "I see you, I value you. Your well-being matters to me." One evening in late autumn, I was sitting on my porch when the male emerged from the forest, walked directly up to me. First time he'd approached so openly. He sat down on the ground maybe 10 feet away, made a series of sounds, different tones, different rhythms, clearly trying to communicate something complex. I listened, tried to understand. He'd gesture sometimes, pointing at the forest, at me, at himself, building a narrative through sound and movement. I started responding, using simple words combined with gestures. "Forest home you," pointing to correlate language with meaning. We sat like that for an hour, man and Bigfoot attempting to bridge a communication gap that shouldn't be bridgeable. I don't know how much either of us truly understood, but we were trying, and the effort itself mattered. He left something that night, a carved piece of wood, crude but deliberate. It looked like two figures standing beside each other, one tall, one shorter. Him and me, I realized. A representation of our friendship rendered in physical form. I kept it on my mantle, still have it 30 years later. One morning in early November, I woke to find the male sitting on my porch. Unusual. He typically only came at dawn or dusk, never in daylight. He looked agitated, kept making urgent sounds, gesturing toward the forest. "Something's wrong," I said. "You need help again?" He nodded emphatically, stood, gestured for me to follow. I grabbed my pack and followed him into the forest. He led me maybe 2 miles to a section of old-growth timber near the river, and I saw what had upset him. Loggers. A new timber company had started operations in this area. They were marking trees for harvest. Old-growth Douglas firs that had been standing for 600+ years. The same kind of trees I'd spent 40 years cutting down. The male pointed at the marked trees, made distressed sounds, looked at me with obvious anguish. "You're asking me to stop them," I said. He nodded. "I don't have that power anymore. I'm retired. I have no influence with timber companies." He kept gesturing, kept making pleading sounds. Didn't understand or didn't accept that I couldn't help. I thought about it. I can't stop them directly, but I can make noise. Contact environmental groups. Get activists involved. Make this harvest expensive and difficult enough that maybe they'll go elsewhere. The male watched me intently, trying to understand. "I'll try," I said. "I can't promise success, but I'll try to protect this forest the way you tried to protect your mate. That's what friends do, right? We help each other." He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, gentle but firm. Acknowledgement and gratitude. That afternoon I made phone calls, contacted every environmental organization I could find, gave them exact coordinates of the planned harvest, described the old growth status of the trees, provided ammunition for protests and legal challenges. My kids heard about it somehow, called me for the first time in months. "Dad, people are saying you contacted environmental groups about a timber harvest. Is that true?" "Yes." Silence then. "Why?" "Because some forests shouldn't be cut down. Because some trees have been standing for 600 years and deserve to keep standing. Because I spent 40 years destroying forests and it's time I did something different." More silence. Then my daughter said, "Dad, that's really good. We're proud of you." First time they'd said that in a decade. The timber company pushed back hard, hired lawyers, threatened lawsuits against the environmental groups, accused me of coordinating protests on private timberland. But the activists didn't give up, set up protest camps, chained themselves to trees, made the harvest so expensive and controversial that the company eventually abandoned the operation and sold the land to a conservation trust. The forest was protected. The old growth would stand, but the victory had consequences. The timber company knew I'd been involved. Word spread in the logging community. I got calls from former colleagues, angry calls accusing me of betraying the industry, of forgetting where I came from. "You spent 40 years making money from timber," one former supervisor said. "Now you're working against us? You're a hypocrite, Art." He wasn't wrong, but I couldn't explain the real reason I'd gotten involved. Couldn't tell him that a Bigfoot had asked for my help, and I'd given it because that creature mattered as much as human economic interests. Winter arrived. The storms intensified. The forest became dangerous. Flooding rivers, unstable hillsides, trees falling without warning. I'd been avoiding the old logging roads. Too many memories of work I regretted. But one morning, the male appeared at my cabin, made urgent sounds, gestured toward the river. Something was wrong again. I followed him through heavy rain. The Kinole River was swollen from rainfall, running fast and high, brown with sediment. The male led me to a section where a massive log jam had formed. Debris from upstream had piled up against a natural bottleneck, creating a dangerous blockage. He pointed at the jam, made distressed sounds. "You want me to clear it?" I asked. "That's dangerous work. The river's running too fast." But I understood why it mattered. If the jam broke violently, it would send a wall of water and debris downstream, could destroy habitat, could kill anything in its path. The male looked at me pleadingly. This was important to him, to the forest he lived in. "Okay," I said. "I'll try. But I need equipment, heavy tools. This isn't work I can do with hand tools." I spent the next 3 days working on that log jam. Brought chainsaws, ropes, metal hooks, cut logs strategically, redirected water flow, slowly dismantled the blockage without triggering a catastrophic release. The male watched sometimes, would help when he could, his strength making work easier that would have been impossible for me alone. But he kept his distance mostly, seemed to understand this was dangerous and wanted to let me work without distraction. On the 4th day, I was making good progress. The jam was maybe 60% cleared. I was cutting a particularly stubborn log that was wedged against a boulder. The riverbank gave way beneath me. 1 second I was standing on solid ground. The next, I was in the water. The river was glacier-fed, brutally cold, running fast enough to tear me away from the bank before I could grab anything. I went under. The current smashed me against rocks. I couldn't breathe, couldn't swim. The cold was paralyzing. My heavy rain gear and boots were pulling me down. I was drowning. I surfaced briefly, gasped for air, saw the riverbank rushing past. Tried to grab a passing branch, but the current was too strong. Then I saw him, the male Bigfoot, running along the bank, matching my speed. He was looking for a place to intercede, searching for an opportunity to help. He disappeared from view. I went under again. Water filled my lungs. My vision was darkening. I was going to die in this river, drowned by the same wilderness I'd spent 40 years exploiting. Then something massive grabbed me, lifted me, pulled me against the current with strength I couldn't comprehend. The male. He jumped into the river upstream, had anchored himself against a boulder and used his body as a barrier. When I'd been swept past, he grabbed me like I weighed nothing. He carried me to the bank, laid me on solid ground. I was coughing up water, hypothermic, barely conscious. He made urgent sounds, picked me up again, started running through the forest. I passed out. I woke up wrapped in blankets at Elena's house. She was there, looking worried. "Art, thank God, you've been unconscious for 6 hours. How did I get here?" "Your Bigfoot friend. He carried you to my driveway, pounded on my door until I came outside. Then he just left, disappeared into the forest once he knew I'd found you." I processed this. The male had saved my life, had risked his own safety diving into that river, had carried me miles to the only human he knew who could provide medical care. "He saved me," I said. "Yes, the same way you saved his mate. I guess that makes you even." But we weren't even. Not really, because I'd spent 40 years destroying the forest he lived in. 40 years leaving dangerous equipment that had almost killed his mate. 40 years treating his world as a resource to exploit. And despite all that, when I was drowning, he'd risked everything to save me. That's forgiveness. That's grace. That's understanding that people and beings are more than the worst things they've done. That redemption is possible. That connection can transcend past harm. I cried in Elena's living room, not from pain, from the overwhelming understanding that I'd been given a gift I didn't deserve. I'm sharing this now because people need to understand that redemption is possible, that beings we've harmed can forgive us when we finally try to do better. Subscribe if you believe that past mistakes don't define us forever, that change matters more than perfection, that connections can form even across the deepest divides. Now, spring of 1995. After the river incident, I recovered slowly. The hypothermia had damaged my lungs. The impact against rocks had broken 3 ribs. I was 65 years old, and my body didn't heal quickly anymore. But during my recovery, the male kept visiting, would leave gifts, would check on me. I'd see him watching from the tree line, making sure I was okay. Elena said it reminded her of family behavior. He's treating you like pack, like someone whose well-being matters to him personally. I started understanding something important. The male didn't care that I was human or that I'd been a logger. He cared that I'd helped when his mate was dying, that I'd tried to protect his forest, that my actions demonstrated I valued his life and his world. Intelligence doesn't require human form. Compassion doesn't need human language. The male had shown me more loyalty and care than most humans I'd known. He'd risked his life for mine. That kind of friendship transcends species. I spent months thinking about 40 years of logging, about all the forests I'd cleared, the old growth I'd destroyed, the habitat I'd eliminated for creatures like the male and his mate. The guilt was overwhelming at first. But then I realized, guilt without action is just self-indulgence. It's making my feelings more important than actually fixing what I'd broken. So I started working, really working. Spent my days removing old logging cables from the forest, documented every abandoned piece of industrial equipment I could find, and reported it to the Forest Service. Contacted timber companies about cleaning up their legacy waste. When they refused, I did it myself. The male watched this work, started helping. He'd show me locations where cables or equipment were hidden, would use his strength to move things I couldn't budge, would bring his mate sometimes. She was fully recovered now, moving easily despite the scar on her leg. One afternoon, we just removed a particularly dangerous cable from near a creek. The male made a sound, then placed both hands over his heart, bowed his head. He was thanking me, but more than that, he was acknowledging the transformation, recognizing that I'd changed from someone who harmed his world to someone trying to heal it. Guilt had driven me to isolation, but guilt transformed into action, into tangible efforts to undo harm. That was something worth carrying. That was redemption. Spring 1995. I was maintaining trails on my property when I noticed something remarkable. The male had created what looked like territorial markers, stacks of stones arranged in specific patterns at regular intervals along the property boundary. I studied them. The patterns weren't random. They seemed to indicate direction, possibly even meaning. One stack pointed toward water sources, another toward dangerous terrain, another toward what I eventually realized was the rocky overhang where we'd treated the female. These were navigational aids, possibly even a form of written communication. The male was creating permanent markers that would help others of his kind navigate safely through the forest. I started documenting the patterns. Noticed they appeared in other locations too, near game trails, water sources, shelter locations. This wasn't instinctive behavior. This was deliberate information architecture, culture being passed through physical markers. One evening, the male found me photographing one of the stone stacks. He made a questioning sound. I showed him my notebook, drawings of the different patterns I'd found. He looked carefully. Then he rearranged one of the stacks I'd been documenting, correcting something I'd misinterpreted. He was teaching me, showing me I'd gotten the meaning wrong, helping me understand his communication system. I'd spent my entire life assuming intelligence looked like human intelligence, required human language, human tools, human social structures. The male was showing me I'd been catastrophically narrow-minded. Intelligence exists in forms we don't recognize because we're not looking properly, because we assume our way is the only way. Summer 1995 brought hikers to the area. Tourism was increasing. People wanted to experience old-growth forest, see wilderness, maybe spot wildlife. The male became more cautious, started avoiding areas where humans traveled. I noticed he'd modified his territorial markers, removing some, relocating others, creating new navigation routes that avoided human traffic. He was adapting, changing his behavior to reduce contact with a species that posed threats he couldn't predict. One afternoon, I saw a group of hikers off-trail, heading toward an area where I knew the male and female sometimes sheltered. If they got too close, there could be an encounter, could be panic, could end with someone getting hurt or the Bigfoot being exposed. I intercepted the hikers. "Trails that way," I said, pointing them back toward the marked route. "This area's got unstable ground, not safe." They grumbled but complied. Crisis averted. That evening the male appeared. He'd been watching. He made a sound that clearly meant thank you. Then he did something unexpected. He led me to a different location and showed me a new stone marker he'd created. The pattern was different from the others, pointed toward my cabin, seemed to indicate human ally, safe. He was teaching others of his kind, if there were others, that I could be trusted, that not all humans were threats. Coexistence isn't just about sharing space, it's about mutual respect, about recognizing when to step in and when to step back, about protecting those who can't protect themselves from exposure. The male understood that. I was learning it. Fall 1995. Elena got sick, cancer, moved fast. Within 2 months, she'd gone from active retirement to hospice care in her home. I visited regularly. So did the male. He'd wait in the woods near her house until dark, then approach. Eleanor would sit on her porch, and the male would emerge from the trees to sit nearby. They couldn't speak, but they'd communicate through gestures, through presence. She'd tell him about her life, He'd make soft sounds that conveyed understanding, even without comprehension of words. "Art," she said one evening, "I saved that female Bigfoot's life. And in doing so, I became part of something bigger than veterinary medicine. I became part of their story. That matters more than anything I did in 40 years of practice." She died in November, peaceful, surrounded by family. The morning after her death, I found something on her porch, a wreath made from evergreen boughs, woven with remarkable skill. In the center, 3 polished river agates arranged in a triangle. The male had made it, had left a funeral offering for the human who'd saved his mate, was honoring Elena's death the way his kind probably honored their own. I brought the wreath to her funeral, placed it on her casket. Her children asked where it came from. "A friend," I said. "Someone whose life she saved. Someone who wanted to say goodbye properly." The male had taught me something profound. Family isn't just blood. It's the bonds we form through shared experience, through helping each other survive impossible things, through showing up consistently when it matters. Eleanor, the male, his mate, me, we were family. Weird, cross-species, inexplicable family, but family nonetheless. Winter 1996. A researcher from the University of Washington contacted me. Someone had reported seeing a Bigfoot in the Olympic Peninsula. They wanted to investigate, wanted to know if I, as a long-time resident, had ever seen anything unusual. I thought about the male, about his mate, about the trust they'd given me, about the fact that scientific discovery would mean losing their privacy, their safety, their ability to exist without being pursued by researchers and enthusiasts. "Never seen anything," I told the researcher. 40 years in these forests. Never saw evidence of anything beyond normal wildlife. I lied, directly, deliberately, to protect beings who couldn't protect themselves from exposure. Later that day, the male appeared. Had he been listening? Did he somehow know I'd protected him? He approached closer than he ever had before, placed one massive hand on top of my head, gentle, deliberate, a blessing or an acknowledgement or both. Then he signed, using gestures I'd taught him months ago during our communication attempts. Made the sign for friend, made the sign for safe, made a gesture that meant keeping a secret. He knew I'd chosen protection over proof, knew I'd valued his well-being over my own credibility. That's wisdom, not knowing everything, knowing what not to share, knowing when silence protects more than speaking proves, knowing that some beings deserve anonymity more than science deserves data. The male had taught me that through his own caution, his own careful navigation of a world where discovery meant danger. Now I was applying that lesson, keeping his secret, protecting his existence by denying it. That's what love looks like across species boundaries. By 1998, I was 68 years old. The years of logging had caught up with me completely. My back was barely functional, needed a cane to walk any distance, couldn't hike the way I used to. The male was aging too. His fur was graying at the shoulders and face. He moved more carefully. I noticed he limped sometimes. Old injury or just the weight of years, I couldn't tell. But we still met regularly. He'd visit my cabin every few weeks. We'd sit together, communicate as best we could, share the companionable silence of 2 old beings who'd been through impossible things together. One evening, his mate came with him. First time she'd approached the cabin since her recovery years ago. She still limped slightly from the cable injury, but moved well otherwise. They sat together on my porch while I sat in my rocking chair. We watched the sunset over the forest. 3 beings from different species, all of us old, all of us scarred, all of us grateful to still be alive. "We're all running out of time," I said aloud. "I don't know how long your kind lives, don't know how much time any of us have left, but I'm grateful for this, for knowing you, for being part of your story." The male made a soft sound, reached over and touched my hand. His mate did the same from the other side. We sat like that until full dark, acknowledging mortality, acknowledging the preciousness of time, acknowledging that our friendship had been one of the most important relationships of my entire life. Spring 1999 brought a health crisis. I had a minor heart attack, spent 3 weeks in the hospital in Forks. When I finally returned home, weak and uncertain, I found my property had been maintained. Firewood stacked, trails cleared, the garden weeded, fresh salmon on my porch. The male had been taking care of things while I was gone, had made sure I'd have what I needed when I returned. When he visited that evening, I tried to thank him. He made a dismissive sound. "This is what friends do, what family does." "I don't know how much longer I have," I told him. "My heart's giving out. Could be months, could be years, but not decades." He tilted his head, listening. "When I'm gone, this property goes to a conservation trust. It'll be protected. No logging, no development. Safe for you and your mate and any others of your kind who might be here." He made a sound that conveyed understanding and appreciation. "But I want you to know, These years, knowing you, being your friend, this has been the best part of my life. Better than the logging career I thought defined me, better than anything I accomplished before. You taught me what actually matters, and I'm grateful." The male moved closer, placed his forehead against mine, a gesture of deep connection he'd shown me only a few times before. We stayed like that for a long moment, two old friends acknowledging that time was running out, that soon this friendship would exist only in memory. But memory matters. Connection matters. Even when it ends, it matters. As my health declined, the male's visits became more frequent. He'd check on me almost daily, would help with tasks I couldn't manage anymore, splitting firewood, carrying heavy supplies, maintaining the cabin. Sometimes his mate would come. They'd both sit with me. We'd exist in comfortable silence. They'd make soft sounds to each other, their own language, their own private communication. One afternoon I was particularly weak, could barely get out of my chair. The male noticed. Without being asked, he carefully lifted me and carried me to my bed, tucked me in like I was a child, made comforting sounds. His mate brought water, fresh greens from the forest, things she thought would help me recover. They stayed nearby all night. I'd wake up periodically and see them sitting vigil outside my window, making sure I was okay, being present during my vulnerability the way I'd been present during theirs. This was family care. This was love expressed through presence and action. This was what I'd been missing my entire life. Beings who showed up consistently, who cared without agenda, who loved simply because they'd chosen to love. Summer 2000. I was 70 years old, weak but stable. The heart medication was keeping me functional. One evening, the male arrived with something unusual. A young Bigfoot, maybe adolescent, smaller than the adults, probably 6 feet tall, with darker fur and curious eyes. The male made introductions through gesture. This was offspring, his and his mate's child, a youngster who'd been born sometime in the years since I'd saved the female. The young one watched me nervously, had probably been taught to avoid humans. But the male made reassuring sounds, seemed to be explaining, "This human is safe, this human is family." After a few minutes, the young one approached cautiously, extended one hand toward me, copying the handshake gesture the male had learned years ago. I shook the youngster's hand. "It's an honor to meet you," I said. The male made sounds I interpreted as, "I wanted my child to know you, to understand that not all humans are threats, that friendship across species is possible, that you saved our family and we remember." He was passing knowledge forward, teaching his offspring that I could be trusted, that our friendship mattered enough to be preserved across generations. The young one sat with us while the sunset faded, asking questions through sounds and gestures, the male answering, telling stories I couldn't fully understand, but recognized as important. This was their culture, their history, their way of preserving knowledge, and I was part of that now, part of their story. The human who'd helped when help was needed, the friend who'd proven trustworthy, the being worth remembering. October 2002. 8 years since the night the male had come to my door seeking help. I was 72 years old. My heart was failing progressively. The doctors said months, maybe a year. I'd made my peace with death, had lived longer than most loggers, had experienced things I'd never imagined possible, had friendships that transcended every boundary I'd thought mattered. One evening in late October, almost exactly 8 years since that first encounter, the male came to visit. He looked troubled, made sounds that conveyed concern. "I'm dying," I told him directly. "My body's giving out. This is how human aging ends." He made a distressed sound, touched my chest gently over my heart. "It's okay," I said. "I've had a good life. And you, knowing you, being your friend, that made everything worth it. That redeemed 40 years of harm I'd done to your world." He shook his head, made a gesture that meant, "You are not harm, you are friend, you are family." "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." The male reached into the thick fur at his side, pulled out something wrapped in leaves, handed it to me carefully. I unwrapped it. Inside was a carving, made from wood, polished smooth, detailed in ways that showed remarkable skill. It depicted 3 figures, a large Bigfoot, a female Bigfoot, and a human, standing together, touching hands, connected. "This is beautiful," I said, tears starting. "This is us, our family." He made an affirming sound. Then he did something extraordinary. He pulled out a second carving, identical to the first. He kept one, gave me one, matching artifacts, physical proof of our bond that would exist beyond our lifetimes. Then he placed both hands on my face, held my gaze with those remarkable emerald eyes, made a sound that conveyed everything we'd shared, everything we'd learned, everything we'd meant to each other. "I love you," I said. "You're my friend, my brother, my family, And I'm grateful every day that you came to my door that night, that you trusted me when you had no reason to, that you let me into your life." He touched his chest, then touched mine, made a connecting gesture, then pointed to the carvings. "We're bound. We're family. This proves it. This continues beyond us." The male stood slowly, clearly didn't want to leave, but understanding he needed to. He raised one hand in the gesture I taught him years ago. "Goodbye, but also, until we meet again. Also, I'll remember." I raised my hand the same way. "I'll remember too, every day. Everything you taught me, everything you gave me." He made one final sound, the sound that meant love, that meant family, that meant everything we'd built together. Then he turned and walked toward the forest, moved slowly, looked back 3 times. The 3rd time he raised his hand again, held it there, making sure I saw, making sure I understood. "This matters. You matter. Our friendship matters." Then the forest claimed him, and he was gone. I never saw the male again. Over the following months, I'd find gifts on my porch occasionally. Fresh fish, polished stones, evidence that he was still nearby, still watching, still caring. But he didn't come in person. Maybe he knew I was dying and couldn't bear to witness it. Maybe his own health was failing. Maybe he'd taught his offspring about me and was letting them take over the gift-giving ritual. I don't know. And I've learned that not knowing is okay, that some mysteries don't need solving, that some relationships exist perfectly without complete understanding. I died in March 2003. Heart failure, peaceful, in my cabin, surrounded by the forest I'd helped protect. But I'm telling you this story now because I need you to understand I'm not dead. This isn't my ghost speaking. Let me explain. Okay, I didn't die in 2003. That was my plan. That was what the doctors predicted. But I'm still here. I'm 92 years old now. 20 years passed when I should have died. And I believe the male had something to do with that. Because 6 months after that final goodbye, when I was barely clinging to life, I woke up one morning to find something on my nightstand. Roots, plant material, arranged carefully with clear intentional placement. The same plants the male had been bringing his mate during her recovery. Natural medicine, anti-inflammatories, compounds that Elena had said showed remarkable healing properties. I started taking them, brewing tea from the roots, eating the plants, and my condition stabilized. The heart failure didn't reverse, but it stopped progressing. I gained strength, started functioning again. My doctors called it spontaneous improvement. Medical anomaly, couldn't explain it. I knew the truth. The male was still taking care of me, still providing medicine, still ensuring I'd survive as long as possible. The gifts continued for years. Even after I'm certain the male must have died, Bigfoot can't live forever either. The medicine kept appearing, his mate bringing it, his offspring, the family continuing to care for the human who'd saved them decades ago. I'm 92 years old, so I live alone on the same 40 acres. The forest is protected. The old logging equipment has been removed. The cables are gone. The wilderness is healing. And somewhere in that wilderness, a family of Bigfoot still watches over me, still leaves gifts, still honors a friendship that started with desperate grief and transformed into something that transcends species, time, and death itself. Here's what the male taught me about being human. First, compassion doesn't require common language or common species. The male loved his mate enough to beg a human for help. That kind of love is universal. That kind of desperation transcends every boundary. When beings suffer, when beings grieve, when beings need help, that's the universal language. And responding to it is what makes us worthy of being called intelligent. Second, redemption is earned through action, not intention. I felt guilty about 40 years of logging, but guilt accomplished nothing. What mattered was removing cables, protecting forests, preventing future harm. The male didn't care about my feelings. He cared about my actions, about whether I was making the world safer for his kind. That's what redeemed me, not feeling bad, doing better. Third, intelligence exists in forms we don't recognize. The male had culture, language, medical knowledge, tool use, emotional depth, capacity for gratitude and friendship. Everything we think makes humans special. But we'd never acknowledged his species existed because they didn't look like us. How many other beings are we ignoring because we're too arrogant to recognize intelligence that doesn't match our narrow definition? Fourth, family is built through consistency, not biology. The male and his mate became my family through years of showing up, helping each other, sharing lives. That's stronger than any blood relation. That's real. That's what matters when you're old and dying and need to know your life meant something to someone. Fifth, sacrifice is how love manifests across species. The male risked his life to save me from that river. Didn't have to. Could have let me drown. But he chose to save me because that's what friends do. That's what family does. Even when it's dangerous, even when the reward is uncertain, you show up, you help, you sacrifice, and finally, some truths are more valuable protected than proven. I could have documented everything, could have captured footage, taken photographs, provided evidence that would vindicate every cryptozoologist and researcher, but that would have meant betraying the male's trust, would have meant destroying his family's privacy and safety. So I chose silence, chose protection, chose love over legacy, and I'd make that choice again every time. The male wasn't mystical, wasn't supernatural. He was a person, a being with culture and family and knowledge passed through generations. He deserves to exist without being pursued, without being studied, without becoming proof of anything. He deserves privacy, freedom, the right to live in the forest that's been his home for longer than humans have been on this continent. There are probably more of them, probably families, communities, societies we know nothing about, and they deserve protection. They deserve the same rights we give endangered species, except they're not animals. They're people, just not human people. That distinction matters. The carving the male gave me sits on my mantle, next to the first carving he made years ago, the crude one showing two figures side by side. I look at them every day, physical proof that I was loved by a being who had no obligation to love me, who had every reason to hate me and my species, who chose friendship anyway. When I die, really die, which can't be much longer now, those carvings go to a private trust, not to be studied, not to be analyzed, just to be preserved, to be honored, to exist as proof that connection across impossible boundaries is real and valuable and sacred. That's the legacy I want, not academic papers or scientific recognition, just the simple fact that I was trusted by a Bigfoot, that I earned that trust through action, that I protected that friendship until my final breath. That's enough, that's everything. If you take anything from this story, take this. The beings we share this world with deserve protection more than we deserve proof they exist. I could have documented the male and his family, could have become famous, could have made money from books and documentaries and speaking tours, but he trusted me. And betraying that trust for personal gain would have proven I'd learned nothing, that I was still the logger who valued profit over preservation. Protect those who trust you. If you encounter something rare, some being or creature or phenomenon that others would want to exploit, choose protection, choose silence, choose to be the guardian instead of the discoverer. Act to undo harm you've caused. I spent 40 years destroying forests, spent the rest of my life removing the debris, protecting what remained, making the wilderness safer. Guilt without action is worthless. Change requires actually changing what you do. Recognize intelligence beyond familiar forms. Bigfoot exist. I know this absolutely, but they're not the only intelligent non-humans we're ignoring. How many species have we dismissed as just animals when they're actually persons deserving of rights and protection? Open your mind. Expand your definition of what matters. Build relationships across difference. The male and I had nothing in common except compassion and willingness to help, but that was enough to build a friendship that lasted decades. Don't let difference prevent connection. Don't let fear prevent reaching out. Some of the most important relationships cross boundaries we think are uncrossable. I'm 92 years old. Telling this story now because I'm finally dying, really dying, and I want people to understand what I learned before it's too late. Subscribe if you believe protection matters more than proof. If you believe some beings deserve privacy more than we deserve discovery. If you believe friendship can exist across any boundary when both beings choose to care. Comment where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever protected someone's secret, even when revealing it would have benefited you. Tell me if you understand why love sometimes requires silence, and if you're ever in the Olympic Peninsula, if you're ever hiking through old-growth forest and you feel watched, be respectful, be quiet. Acknowledge that you're a guest in someone else's home. The male and his family are still out there, still watching, still protecting their forest, still honoring the memory of a human who learned too late what mattered, but learned it well enough to change. Thank you, my friend, wherever you are. Whatever you've become, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible, that friendship transcends species, that love is the only thing that matters at the end. You saved my life in that river, but more than that, you saved my soul by giving me purpose after 40 years of harm, and I'm grateful every day until my last breath.